Professor Quillnox adjusted his 3 pairs of spectacles and gazed out at his classroom of eager young xenobiologists. Well, mostly eager. The flibbit in the front row was currently a nervous shade of purple, which meant it was either excited about today's lesson or terrified of pop quizzes. With flibbits, you never could tell. "All right, class, settle down," Quillnox announced, his crystalline voice echoing through the lecture hall. "Today we're continuing our survey of harmless species across the galaxy. I know, not as exciting as last week's lesson on the carnivorous gas clouds of Theta Prime, but understanding peaceful civilizations is just as important for a well-rounded xenobiologist." Kronk, the know-it-all crystalline being in the 3rd row, immediately raised one of his many appendages. "Professor, shouldn't we be studying more dangerous species? I mean, what's the point of learning about creatures that couldn't hurt a quantum flea?" "Patience, Kronk," Quillnox replied with the weary tone of someone who'd answered this question roughly 3,000 times in his teaching career. "Not every species in the galaxy is trying to dissolve you with acid or harvest your organs for interdimensional cuisine. Some beings actually evolved to be, dare I say it, pleasant." Pip, a tiny floating orb of pure enthusiasm, bobbed excitedly near the ceiling. Oh, are we going to learn about the harmony singers of Nebula 7? I heard they communicate entirely through interpretive dance and never hurt anyone. Close, Pip, but today we're examining an even more fascinating example of peaceful evolution. Quillnox turned to his holographic display and began scrolling through his prepared files. "We'll be studying a species that has managed to develop advanced technology and space travel without developing any significant biological weapons or aggressive tendencies. Truly remarkable, considering most species need at least some survival instincts to make it off their home planet." The class leaned forward with mild interest. Flibbit turned a slightly less nervous shade of purple, which Quillnox took as a good sign. "Let me just pull up their file here," he muttered, squinting at his display through all 6 lenses. "Now where did I put that? Ah, here we go. Species designation. Oh, this should be perfect for today's lesson." What Professor Quillnox didn't notice, as he confidently clicked on what he thought was the file for the gentle herbivore collective of Pastoral Prime, was that his cursor had drifted slightly to the left. Instead of opening a lesson about the galaxy's most peaceful vegetarians, he had just accessed a file marked with more warning labels than a toxic waste disposal unit. The file header flashed across the screen. Species, humans, planet of origin, Earth. Classification, Deathworld, Class 12. Proceed with extreme caution. But Quillnox, busy adjusting his spectacles and clearing his throat for his lecture, missed this entirely. As far as he knew, he was about to teach his students about the most harmless creatures in the known galaxy. "Ah yes, here we are," he said cheerfully, completely oblivious to the cosmic-level mistake he was about to make. "Today, class, we'll be learning about humans." As if the universe had a particularly twisted sense of timing, the classroom door hissed open at that exact moment. What walked through that door made every alien in the room question their life choices. Jake Martinez stood 6 feet tall, which in a classroom designed for beings who averaged about 3 feet in height, made him look like a skyscraper with legs. His dark hair was disheveled, his eyes were bloodshot, and he moved with the shambling gait of someone who had been awake for approximately 37 hours straight. "Sorry I'm late, Professor," Jake mumbled, his voice a deep rumble that made Flibbit turn an alarming shade of chartreuse. "My transport got delayed, and I've been traveling for like 2 days straight. I am absolutely dead on my feet right now." The classroom fell silent. Pip dropped about 6 inches in altitude, which for a floating orb was the equivalent of fainting. Kronk's crystalline structure actually dimmed with shock. "Dead," whispered Flibbit, now cycling rapidly through colors like a panic-stricken rainbow. "He says he's dead, but he's still moving. Is this some kind of zombie situation?" Professor Quillnox, still blissfully unaware of his filing error, cleared his throat nervously. "Ah, welcome exchange student Martinez. Class, this is our visiting human from the he glanced at his screen, peaceful planet of Earth. Please take a seat anywhere you can fit." Jake looked around the classroom, which was clearly not designed for someone of his proportions. The desks came up to about his knees. "Right, okay, I'll just figure something out." He carefully lowered himself onto the floor, cross-legged, which put him at eye level with most of his classmates. "Man, I'm really running on fumes here. Haven't slept properly in forever." "Fumes." Kronk's voice cracked, creating a sound like breaking glass. "Professor, he's literally telling us he's operating on toxic vapors. This is clearly some kind of chemical-based life form." No, Jake said, completely missing the terror in Kronk's voice. "It's just an expression. I'm just super tired. What I really need is some coffee." Please tell me this place has coffee, or at least something caffeinated. I literally cannot function without caffeine. The word coffee hit the classroom like a neutron bomb. Every alien present immediately began accessing their personal databases, trying to figure out what this mysterious substance was, and why this allegedly peaceful creature seemed to depend on it for basic survival. Pip, who had recovered enough to float back up to his normal height, was the first to speak. Coffee? We've never heard of this coffee. Is it some kind of food? Food? I guess sort of, Jake said, rubbing his temples. It's more like liquid energy, liquid motivation, liquid will to live, really. I mean, I drink like 4 or 5 cups a day, just to stay human. The silence that followed this statement was so complete you could have heard a quantum particle sneeze. 4 or 5 cups, Flibbit repeated slowly, now a color that didn't exist in most species' visual spectrum, of liquid will to live, per day. To stay human. Yeah, pretty much, Jake confirmed, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just described what sounded like the most terrifying chemical dependency in galactic history. So, when does the cafeteria open? Because I'm starting to get a headache, and trust me, nobody wants to see me when I have a caffeine withdrawal headache. At the word withdrawal, Professor Quillnox's spectacles actually fell off. All 6 of them. While Jake sat on the floor looking like death warmed over and wondering why everyone was staring at him like he'd just announced his plans to consume their firstborn, the aliens had shifted into full research mode. Their personal databases were working overtime, and what they were discovering about this mysterious coffee substance was absolutely terrifying. Pip was the first to break the horrified silence, his voice now a barely audible whisper. Professor, I've accessed the Galactic Substance Database. Coffee is listed as a stimulant derived from the seeds of a plant species. The active compound is called caffeine, and according to this data, it's classified as a naturally occurring pesticide. A pesticide? Flibbit had now achieved a color that was somehow simultaneously ultraviolet and infrared. He's drinking pesticide, voluntarily, multiple times per day. Kronk's crystalline structure was practically vibrating with shock as he processed his own research. It gets worse. Much worse. I'm looking at the molecular composition here, and caffeine is chemically similar to adenosine, which regulates sleep cycles in most carbon-based life forms. But instead of promoting rest, caffeine blocks these receptors, essentially hijacking the nervous system. Hijacking the nervous system, Professor Quillnox repeated weakly, finally retrieving his spectacles from the floor. Of course it is. Jake, completely unaware that he was being discussed like a walking chemical weapon, stretched and yawned. Man, I could really go for a double espresso right about now, maybe a triple. I've got 3 more classes after this, and there's no way I'm making it without some serious caffeine. Triple, Pip squeaked, nearly hitting the ceiling. Professor, he's talking about increasing the dosage. This is clearly some kind of combat enhancement protocol. Kronk was now accessing more databases, his panic driving him to dig deeper into the research. Oh, this is fascinating in the most terrifying way possible. Listen to this. The average lethal dose of caffeine for most known species would be approximately 50 milligrams. But according to these Earth databases I'm accessing, a single cup of this coffee contains between 90 and 150 milligrams of caffeine. The classroom fell so silent you could have heard a photon drop. So what you're telling me, Professor Quillnox said slowly, is that our exchange student here regularly consumes, per day, enough of a naturally occurring pesticide to kill most sentient beings in the galaxy. Multiple times over. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Kronk confirmed, his voice now sounding like grinding glass, and he's asking for a triple dose. Flibbit had given up on maintaining any recognizable color, and was now just a swirling mass of panic-induced hues. But why? Why would any species evolve to require poison to function? What kind of death world produces creatures that need pesticide just to stay awake? Jake chose that moment to let out another massive yawn and mutter, God, I'm so tired I could sleep for a week. If I don't get some coffee soon, I'm literally going to pass out right here on the floor. Pass out, Pip repeated in horror. The combat stimulant is wearing off. He's entering a dangerous withdrawal state, and he keeps calling it liquid energy. Flibbit added, now pulsing with alarmed bioluminescence. Liquid motivation, liquid will to live. Professor, I think we're dealing with some kind of biological warfare agent that this species has learned to depend on for basic survival. Professor Quillnox was frantically scrolling through his files now, trying to figure out how his lesson on peaceful herbivores had turned into a discussion of chemical dependency and biological warfare. There must be some mistake. The file says these humans are from a harmless agricultural world. Professor Kronk interrupted, I'm accessing the planetary classification database now. Earth isn't listed as an agricultural world, it's, oh no, no. What? Professor Quillnox asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world. Gravity that would crush most species, an atmosphere that's 21% combustible gas, weather patterns that include frozen water falling from the sky at terminal velocity, and apparently flora that produces chemical weapons disguised as beverages. Jake picked that moment to check his watch and sigh deeply. Seriously, when does the cafeteria open? I'm starting to get the shakes, and I've got a paper due tomorrow that I haven't even started. I'm going to need like 6 cups minimum to pull an all-nighter. The word shakes sent every alien in the room into a new level of panic, but it was the phrase 6 cups minimum that nearly caused a mass evacuation. 10 minutes later, the Academy's emergency food synthesizer had been working overtime to produce what the computer helpfully labeled as human stimulant beverage, warning. Potentially lethal to most species. The machine had actually printed out a disclaimer longer than most doctoral dissertations, but Jake just grabbed the steaming mug without reading it. Oh, thank God, he said, inhaling deeply. You have no idea how much I needed this. You guys are lifesavers. The irony of that statement was completely lost on Jake, but it hit the aliens like a meteor. Lifesavers. He was calling the deadly poison that kept him functional a lifesaver. Professor Quillnox had quietly activated the classroom's emergency recording system, partly for scientific documentation and partly because he was fairly certain they were about to witness either a miracle of biological adaptation or the most spectacular alien death in Academy history. Jake took his first sip, and the transformation was immediate and absolutely terrifying to observe. His bloodshot eyes suddenly snapped into focus with laser-like intensity. His slumped posture straightened until he was sitting ramrod straight. The exhausted shuffle in his movements disappeared, replaced by quick, precise gestures. Most disturbing of all, he smiled. Not a tired, polite smile, but a wide, energetic grin that showed way too many teeth. Oh yeah, that's the stuff, Jake said, his voice now clear and sharp instead of the mumbled groaning from before. I can actually think again. Man, I love coffee. It's like liquid productivity. Flibbit had completely given up on maintaining any coherent color and was now just strobing like a panicked lighthouse. Professor, look at him. The combat stimulant is activating. His entire physical demeanor has changed. His pupils have dilated, Kronk observed, with scientific horror. Muscle tension has increased. Reaction speed appears to have improved dramatically. This is clearly some kind of battle enhancement protocol designed for high-stress combat situations. Jake took another long drink and let out a satisfied sigh. You know what, I think I can actually tackle that Xenobiology report now. Professor, do you have any extra reading materials? I'm feeling pretty motivated to dive deep into this subject. Motivated, Pip whispered from near the ceiling. The chemical is making him aggressive about learning. What kind of terrifying species weaponizes education? The same kind that drinks pesticide for breakfast, apparently, Professor Quillnox muttered, making frantic notes on his tablet. Jake was now moving with quick, efficient gestures as he pulled out his electronic notebook. His fingers flew across the interface at a speed that made the aliens nervous. Everything about him radiated focused energy and barely contained enthusiasm. This is fascinating stuff, really, Jake continued, completely oblivious to the terror he was inspiring. I mean, the diversity of species in this galaxy is incredible. Back on Earth, we've got maybe 8 million species, but out here, the possibilities are endless. I could study this forever. Forever, Flibbit repeated faintly. The stimulant has given him delusions of immortality. Jake finished his first cup and looked around hopefully. Hey, is there any chance I could get a refill? I'm thinking maybe a large this time. I've got about 6 hours of studying ahead of me, and I want to make sure I stay focused. The request for more poison sent the aliens into a fresh wave of panic, but what happened next was even worse. Jake started talking faster. You know, I was reading about Flibbit physiology on the transport here, and the color-changing mechanism is absolutely brilliant from an evolutionary standpoint. The chromatophore response time must be incredibly fast to achieve those rapid color shifts. And Kronk, your crystalline structure, is that silicon-based. The light refraction patterns are gorgeous. How do you process information through a mineral matrix? And Pip, gravitational manipulation for flight, right? The energy requirements must be enormous. The rapid-fire questions and genuine enthusiasm were perhaps the most terrifying thing the aliens had witnessed yet. Jake was demonstrating advanced knowledge, tactical analysis, and what appeared to be reconnaissance gathering, all while under the influence of his chemical enhancement. He's interrogating us, Kronk said in a voice like breaking crystal. The combat stimulant has made him curious about our biological weaknesses, and he's processing information at an accelerated rate, Pip added, bobbing nervously. Look how fast he's taking notes. That's not natural learning behavior, that's intelligence gathering. Professor Quillnox was beginning to sweat, which was impressive considering his species didn't technically have sweat glands. Exchange student Martinez, perhaps you should, slow down a bit. You seem very energetic. Energetic. Yeah, I guess I am pretty wired right now, Jake laughed, which made everyone flinch. This is actually really good coffee. Usually the synthesized stuff tastes terrible, but this has a nice bold flavor. Rich, complex, maybe a hint of chocolate undertones. You guys did a great job with the programming. He finished the second cup and immediately started looking around for more. Seriously though, I could drink this all day. Back home, I usually go through about a pot and a half during finals week. Really helps me stay sharp, you know. A pot and a half, Professor Quillnox repeated weakly. Oh yeah, easy. Sometimes more if I'm really cramming. The record was probably 12 cups in one day during my senior thesis. I didn't sleep for about 36 hours, but man, I was productive. Got like 50 pages written. The classroom had gone completely silent, except for the sound of Jake enthusiastically crunching through academic materials at superhuman speed, occasionally pausing to mutter things like fascinating, and I need to research this more. And where can I get more coffee? That's when Professor Quillnox quietly reached under his desk and pressed the emergency alert button. The emergency alert system at Galactic Academy had been designed to handle a variety of crisis situations. Reactor meltdowns, dimensional rifts, the occasional student accidentally summoning an elder god during advanced metaphysics class. What it had not been designed for was exchange student from Deathworld exhibits signs of chemical warfare enhancement while requesting additional poison. Within 30 seconds the classroom door burst open and 3 Academy security officers rushed in, their energy weapons drawn but set to non-lethal settings. They took one look at Jake, who was now on his 3rd cup of coffee and had somehow managed to read through 17 chapters of Xenobiology textbooks while taking detailed notes, and immediately called for backup. Control, this is Security Team Alpha. The lead officer spoke into his communicator, never taking his eyes off Jake. We have a code orange situation in classroom 7. Deathworlder exhibiting signs of chemical enhancement. Subject appears to be in an accelerated learning state and is requesting additional stimulants. Jake looked up from his notes, blinking in confusion. Oh hey there, is everything okay? I'm not being too loud, am I? Sometimes I get a little chatty when I'm caffeinated. The word caffeinated caused all 3 security officers to take a step back. Sir, the lead officer said carefully, we're going to need you to step away from the stimulant beverage and come with us for a medical evaluation. Medical evaluation, Jake laughed, which made everyone in the room flinch. Guys, I'm fine. Actually, I'm better than fine. I'm finally awake and ready to learn. This is exactly what I needed after that long transport. You know how it is when you haven't had your coffee fix. Coffee fix, Pip whispered from the ceiling. He's admitting to chemical dependency again. Jake stood up, which immediately put him at eye level with the floating security officers and made them very nervous about their positioning. Look, I appreciate the concern, but I literally can't function without caffeine. It's not a want, it's a need. My brain just doesn't work properly without it. I get headaches, I can't concentrate, I become basically useless. He's describing withdrawal symptoms, Kronk announced helpfully. Classic signs of addiction to a combat enhancement drug. Addiction is such a strong word, Jake said, completely missing the rising panic in the room. I prefer to think of it as a symbiotic relationship. I give the coffee a good home, and it gives me the ability to exist as a functional human being. It's like fuel for my brain. The lead security officer was now speaking rapidly into his communicator. Control, subject has confirmed chemical dependency and is describing the substance as brain fuel. Request immediate hazmat team and xenochemical specialist. Hazmat team, Jake looked genuinely confused now. For coffee, guys, it's just coffee. People have been drinking this stuff for thousands of years. It's like the second most traded commodity on Earth after oil. We literally built our entire modern civilization on caffeine. The silence that followed this statement was deafening. Their entire civilization, Professor Quillnox repeated slowly, runs on a chemical warfare agent. That would explain a lot about human history. Actually, Kronk said thoughtfully. All those wars, the rapid technological advancement, the aggressive expansion into space. They're an entire species of chemically enhanced soldiers. Jake was getting more animated as he tried to explain, which was exactly the wrong thing to do in a room full of terrified aliens. No, you guys have it all wrong. Coffee isn't dangerous. Well, okay, you can technically overdose on caffeine, but you'd have to drink like 50 cups in a row or something crazy like that. Most people just drink a few cups a day to stay alert. 50 cups, Flibbit moaned, now cycling through colors that existed only in theoretical physics. He's casually discussing lethal dosages. And he said most people, Pip added in horror. This isn't just him, this is species-wide chemical enhancement. The security team leader was practically shouting into his communicator now. Control, we need the Academy commander down here immediately. The Deathworlder has revealed that his entire species is dependent on chemical stimulants for basic cognitive function. This is a galactic security issue. Jake threw his hands up in exasperation, which caused every alien in the room to duck for cover. Okay, clearly there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Coffee is not a weapon. It's a beverage, a delicious, necessary, life-giving beverage that makes mornings bearable and late nights possible. Life-giving, one of the security officers repeated into his radio. Subject continues to describe the chemical as essential for survival. Because it is, Jake exclaimed, his coffee-enhanced enthusiasm now in full swing. Do you know what the world would look like without coffee? Chaos. Pure chaos. Office workers stumbling around like zombies, students falling asleep in class, drivers nodding off at the wheel. Coffee isn't just a drink, it's the foundation of functional society. This passionate defense of his caffeine dependency was perhaps the most terrifying thing Jake could have said. Every alien present now believed they were dealing with a species that had weaponized stimulants to such a degree that their entire civilization would collapse without them. Jake, oblivious to the panic he was causing, grabbed his fourth cup of coffee and took a long, satisfied drink. Ah, that's better. You know what, I think I'm going to need at least 2 more cups to get through the rest of today's classes. Maybe 3. The request for additional chemical enhancement was the final straw. The lead security officer immediately activated the Academy's highest alert level while his teammates began clearing the classroom of all non-essential personnel. Jake just stood there holding his coffee, wondering why everyone was running away from him and why the emergency sirens had started going off. Did I say something wrong? He asked, but by then, he was talking to an empty room. Academy Commander Zephyros arrived 15 minutes later, accompanied by a full hazmat team, 3 xenochemical specialists, and what appeared to be half the Academy's teaching staff. He found Jake sitting peacefully in the empty classroom, working his way through his 5th cup of coffee while casually reading through the advanced quantum mechanics textbook he'd borrowed from the library. Exchange student Martinez, Commander Zephyros announced, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had dealt with interdimensional invasions and temporal paradoxes before breakfast. I'm going to need you to very slowly put down the chemical enhancement beverage and step away from the table. Jake looked up from his textbook, genuinely confused. Chemical enhancement. Oh, you mean my coffee? Commander, I think there's been some kind of huge misunderstanding here. Misunderstanding? The commander's 4 eyes narrowed dangerously. Son, we have reports that you've consumed multiple doses of a lethal stimulant, that you've described your species as dependent on chemical warfare agents, and that you've threatened to consume additional doses despite showing clear signs of toxic enhancement. Jake blinked slowly, then started laughing. Not the manic, caffeine-fueled laughter from before, but genuine confused amusement. Wait. You think coffee is a chemical weapon? You think humans are chemically enhanced soldiers? The evidence speaks for itself, Commander Zephyros replied grimly. Your planet is classified as a Class 12 death world, you consume substances that would kill most sentient species, and you exhibit dramatic behavioral changes under the influence of these substances. That's when Professor Quillnox, who had been frantically double-checking his files for the past 20 minutes, finally spoke up. Commander, I think we may have a problem. A big problem. Bigger than harboring a chemically enhanced Deathworlder, the commander asked. Much bigger, Professor Quillnox said weakly, holding up his tablet. I've been reviewing the actual Earth classification files, and it turns out humans aren't classified as chemically enhanced warriors. They're classified as, well, this is embarrassing. They're classified as persistence hunters. The room fell silent. Persistence hunters. Commander Zephyros repeated. Yes, sir. Apparently, humans evolved to chase their prey across vast distances until the prey literally died of exhaustion. They don't need chemical enhancement for warfare because they're naturally designed to outlast anything that runs from them. The coffee isn't a combat drug, it's just how they stay awake. Jake nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. See, humans have this weird relationship with sleep. We're naturally programmed to be tired most of the time, but we've built a society that requires us to be alert for like 16 hours a day. Coffee just bridges that gap. It's not making us superhuman, it's making us human. Commander Zephyros was rapidly scrolling through the Earth files on his own device. So you're telling me that this substance, which our analysis shows contains enough stimulants to kill a Rigelian battle rhino, is just casual breakfast beverage for your species? Pretty much, yeah, Jake confirmed. I mean, some people drink tea instead, but that's got caffeine too, just less of it. And don't even get me started on energy drinks. Those things are basically liquid lightning. Liquid lightning? Pip whispered from somewhere near the ceiling. There are stronger versions. Oh yeah, tons of them, Jake said cheerfully. Pre-workout supplements, espresso shots, those little energy drink packets you dump in water. Humans have been finding new and creative ways to caffeinate themselves for centuries. It's like a hobby. The xenochemical specialists were huddled around their equipment, running calculations and looking increasingly disturbed. Commander, one of them called out, if his species has been consuming these substances for centuries, their tolerance levels must be astronomical. What we considered a lethal dose might be like drinking water to them. Exactly, Jake said, pointing at the specialist with his coffee cup. You get it. Humans can handle caffeine, because we've been drinking it forever. Natural selection at work. The people who couldn't handle coffee probably didn't make it through college. Professor Quillnox cleared his throat nervously. Exchange student Martinez, when you said coffee was the foundation of functional society, you weren't talking about chemical warfare enhancement. You were talking about productivity. Well yeah, Jake said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the galaxy. Have you ever tried to function on 3 hours of sleep without caffeine? It's basically impossible. Coffee doesn't make us superhuman, it makes us capable of dealing with our own poor life choices. Commander Zephyros set down his tablet and rubbed his temples. So let me get this straight. Your species evolved on a death world with crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, and predators that could kill most galactic citizens with their bare hands. But instead of developing natural weapons or armor, you developed the ability to drink poison for fun and chase things until they die of exhaustion. When you put it like that, it does sound pretty weird, Jake admitted. But hey, it worked out. We made it to space, didn't we? The commander looked around at his security team, his hazmat specialists, and his teaching staff, all of whom were staring at Jake like he was some kind of bizarre evolutionary accident. Exchange student Martinez, he said finally. I'm going to authorize the installation of a human-grade coffee synthesis unit in the academy cafeteria, with appropriate warning labels. Really? Jake's face lit up with genuine joy. That's awesome. Thank you so much, Commander. You have no idea how much this means to me. I was starting to worry I'd have to go through withdrawal, and nobody wants to see that. No, Commander Zephyros said faintly, I imagine they don't. As the security teams and specialists filed out of the classroom, shaking their heads and muttering about Deathworld species and their inexplicable beverage choices, Jake settled back down with his textbook and his coffee. Professor Quillnox, he called out as the professor was packing up his materials. Thanks for the warm welcome. I think I'm really going to like it here. Professor Quillnox paused at the door and looked back at Jake, who was contentedly sipping his coffee and reading about quantum mechanics like nothing had happened. Exchange student Martinez, he said. I have a feeling you're going to be the most popular student this academy has ever had. And he was right. Within a week, Jake's coffee drinking had become legendary throughout the academy. Students would gather to watch him consume what they called Deathworld fuel while casually discussing advanced physics. The coffee machine in the cafeteria, installed with warning labels in 47 different languages, became a tourist attraction. But the best part was the new course that Professor Quillnox added to the curriculum. Advanced Deathworld Biology, How to Survive on Liquid Rocket Fuel and Determination. Jake was naturally the teaching assistant.